video conference software. So I want to welcome Councillors O'Keefe, Wainwright, Duncan and Fallett to the meeting over video conference, and my colleagues Councillor Garnett and Councillor Rintoul here in the chamber. This is a first, so please bear with us, members of the public, as we work through this new technology. I would like to call our regular council meeting of Tuesday, April 14th, 2020 to order. And I first want to acknowledge that we are holding our meeting in the traditional and ancestral lands of the Wasanich people. To our Sawit, Sartlip, Sycam, and Pakwachin First Nation neighbors with whom we share this land on the peninsula, we wish you health and safety during the current health pandemic. I'd now look for approval of the agenda. We do have two amendments to the agenda. We've had councillors request raising item 1610 from correspondence for information. That will become item 14.1 under correspondence. And also I have a suggestion to move item 5A2, which is the revenue anticipation borrowing bylaw, until after 13B, which is when we are considering options for a delayed tax due date.
I'll move approval of the agenda as amended.
Second.
All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. I'll now turn to our EOC Director, Mr. Randy Humble, and Deputy Director, Fire Chief Brett Mickelson, to give an update on our town COVID-19 EOC update.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And good evening, Mayor and Council and members of the public that are tuning in to the live webcast. The focus of this evening's update will be on the work of the town's Emergency Operations Centre, or EOC, for the last several weeks. As Council is aware, on March 17th, the EOC was activated to level 2, which meant that we filled all the various section positions, including the Director, Deputy Director, Information Officer, Risk Management Officer, Operations, Planning, Finance, and Logistics, which also includes IT, or Information Technology Services. In addition to the aforementioned section positions, we are fortunate in having representation by both the Saanich Peninsula Chamber of Commerce and the SBIA as part of the planning section of the EOC. Having the input and support of these two business organizations, and in particular their respective executive directors, Danny Warner and Morgan Shaw, has been extremely beneficial. In total, we have approximately 10 to 12 persons working out of the EOC Monday to Friday. Over the weekends, including this past long weekend, the EOC scales back to a level 1. I'm going to once again reinforce how very fortunate the town is with respect to having been fairly diligent on the emergency training and preparedness front. Being exposed to this training has allowed us to transition into an effective and efficient EOC relatively quickly and without a significant learning curve. Having said that, I'll reiterate once again that given the extraordinary nature of the COVID-19 pandemic, no amount of training can truly prepare one for the kinds of challenges and impacts we're currently facing. As everyone knows, the EOC operates out of the new Community Safety Building, which was purposefully designed and constructed to include an EOC function. Having spent the last 3 weeks at the EOC, I can attest as to how extremely fortunate we are, as well as the community is, with respect to being able to have this state-of-the-art facility within our community. So what is the purpose and work of the town's EOC? Well, essentially, an EOC is responsible for the critical elements of the town's emergency management efforts, and in particular, the activation of Sydney's emergency response plan, business continuity plan, and internal and external advanced recovery efforts. So focusing on these elements in a bit more detail. Regarding response planning, the EOC planning section has been active in developing response plans, including looking 2, 4, 6, 8 weeks out. Given the ever-changing and quickly evolving nature of the COVID-19 pandemic and the rapidity of the provincial orders, these plans need to be continuously reviewed and updated, and therefore extremely fluid. With respect to business continuity planning, and I've talked about this before, business continuity planning involves the development of plans for both the Town of Sydney as an organization, as well as externally, the business community. Plans have been developed and implemented on both of these fronts. The town has developed a 5-level business continuity plan for town operations, and we're still currently operating at a level 2, which essentially means we are, for the most part, maintaining our current operations. It's important to note, however, that maintaining near normal operations and services has been based upon the implementation of appropriate safety measures as directed by the Provincial Health Officer, as well as WorkSafe BC. Examples of this include having 1 staff member per vehicle, as well as other physical distancing requirements for all town operations. From the outset of activating our EOC to a level 2, there has been a focus on the need to proactively initiate our recovery efforts. Recovery needs to begin at the moment of impact and continues until a formal, coordinated effort ceases to be necessary or effective. Recovery planning should occur with several objectives in mind. Firstly, to reduce human suffering. A well-coordinated recovery effort should reduce human suffering, including the psychosocial impacts, and directly help citizens return to normalcy as quickly as possible. Secondly, to protect community culture. The entire character of our community can be influenced by how well we manage the recovery process. Success in recovery means protection of residents, jobs, and community organizations and events. Thirdly, to reduce economic losses. In combination with individual assistance, recovery also focuses on our all-important and vital business community. Recovery should focus on assisting businesses get back to normal while encouraging growth in every sector of our economy, including retail, service, manufacturing, construction, high-tech, light industrial, and as well as home-based businesses. And finally, the objective should be to enhance sustainability and resiliency within our community. We must be committed to ensuring that beyond the COVID-19 pandemic, we become a more sustainable and resilient community. This means supporting and building upon the principle that every citizen, every business, every organization, and every institution be able to withstand future events, disasters, pandemics through enhanced community health, well-being, and preparedness. In the coming weeks, both myself and Deputy Director Brett Mickelson will provide more details on the EOC's proposed Advanced Recovery Plan, including potential resources to assist us in our efforts. In addition to the aforementioned focus on response, business continuity, and advanced recovery planning, the EOC has also made a concerted effort with respect to ensuring our community receives reliable, accurate, and up-to-date information regarding all aspects of COVID-19. This focus has been undertaken through unprecedented levels of communication on all fronts, including daily communication with partner governments via such mediums as teleconferences and video conferencing. This includes meetings with the province of BC, including various provincial ministries such as Health, Municipal Affairs and Housing, and Public Safety, meetings with Emergency Management BC and PREOC, meetings with the various health authorities, both provincially as well as regional, and other local municipal governments within the region, including the CRD. In addition, the EOC follows the daily television press conferences being undertaken by Prime Minister Trudeau, and of course our Provincial Health Officer, Dr. Bonnie Henry, and Minister of Health, Adrian Dix. We do this to glean new information, including learning of any new provincial orders that we can incorporate onto our website. The EOC has also regular touch-ins with the local RCMP, local community organizations, essential businesses, and senior long-term care facilities. Along with the significant external communications, there is, of course, significant internal communications taking place daily. These include daily EOC briefings of all EOC staff by both myself and Chief Mickelson, daily meetings between the Director and Deputy Director of the EOC, daily scheduled briefings between the Mayor, representing the town's policy group, myself as the Director, and Acting CAO Andrew Hissick, as well as the provision of daily situation reports to Council. Lastly, regarding communications, I want to touch upon the EOC's efforts regarding public and community communications. The information section of our EOC has been extremely active and attentive, in particular updating the COVID-19 webpage on a daily basis. It's also worth noting that our COVID page has grown to the point whereby we've established a number of child page categories to assist the public in locating the specific information that they may be searching for. In addition to the use of the website, the EOC has also utilized the town's social media, including Facebook and Twitter, print media via the Peninsula News Review, radio and television interviews, typically resulting from our EOC media releases, distributing information posters throughout the town to those that don't have access to computers, the use of PSAs, and I want to give a shout out here to Radio Sydney and thank them for playing these service announcements. Use of the reader board signs, one at the Mary Winspear Centre as well as one on Lochside Drive. Signage explaining social distancing and indicating modified access to either facilities or pathways. We are also currently working with the town's administration department regarding a special edition of Town Talk that will focus on key COVID-19 information. And Mayor and Council have also been active regarding public communications by hosting 2 Sydney virtual town hall forums on COVID-19. And these forums included updates to the community on the town's response to the pandemic, followed by a Q&A session. And both of the events were live streamed on Sydney Radio, and the second event was live streamed on Facebook. I would now like to turn it over to EOC Deputy Director Brett Mickelson to provide a brief summary of a few of the other key initiatives that have been successfully implemented by the EOC.
Good evening.
Mic's not on. Want to switch there, Brett?
Try that again. Good evening. Thank you, Randy. I'll briefly detail some of the key initiatives that we've been undertaking. Listening to Randy, we've been quite busy, and I'll highlight some of the key initiatives we've undertaken. First would have been our critical supply chain rest stop in the Mary Winspear parking lot, and recently that was augmented by the addition of Shaw Wi-Fi, which was a request from the users, so that was another success story we're very happy to report on. We've added shower facilities in the Iroquois Park for our persons or vulnerable population with no fixed address, and we've included outreach posters for those folks regarding additional resources where they can access the showers, the dates and times, as well as the food bank, and that's been very well received. The EOC is currently working with BC Housing and Island Health to determine needs regarding potential shelter options, and just prior to attending this meeting, I participated in a conference call with BC Housing as well as the ministry. We've put up COVID-19 response posters in a large number of multifamily, residential and businesses as general info for those who don't access information on the internet. We've had our bylaw enforcement ambassadors, which has been a mix of fire as well as town staff in response to the provincial order requesting municipalities to assist bylaw orders to educate the public and business on physical distancing and other important health measures. And we had a number, I think we've had 150 floor decals manufactured, and we've distributed. So it's been quite nice. I participated in some of these. You go particularly to the smaller storefront businesses on Beacon and Bevan. You can go in and describe the importance of why we need to incorporate physical distancing and some of these administrative measures into how businesses are staying open. You provide them with the decals that show that you have to be a minimum of 2 meters or 6 feet apart, and they're very appreciative, and it kind of just enables them to stay in the game during these difficult times. Posters and educational material have been distributed throughout the town regarding physical distancing and the walkways. You've seen those if you've gone up and down Beacon or any of our pathways. We've reached out to TELUS and received a number of computer tablets that were donated, and they were distributed to senior care facilities so that the residents there can stay connected with their loved ones. And again, that's a huge success, and special thanks to Will and our IT folks for configuring those and getting those able to be distributed. That really enables the psychosocial issues that particularly our elderly face that are in extended care facilities connect with their loved ones, and that makes a huge difference. Again, our IT group has provided an interactive map for Sydney Business Community Services updates, and this is a searchable web map illustrating the local business services and updates that the SBA has been gathering, and this map is being kept current daily. So that's an excellent resource as well. In closing, I would like to thank our residents, our business community, and of course our community organizations within the town and all their efforts to come together. And really, we've been 100% committed in our effort to fight the spread of COVID-19, and we have been successful in the town to date. I would like to thank our healthcare providers, our first responders, essential business, our EOC staff, and the town employees for the work they're doing to keep our community safe and healthy. Finally, I would like to thank Mayor and Council for their steady and calm leadership and support to the community through this crisis. I'm sure you didn't sign up to be elected officials in the midst of a pandemic, but you're doing a great job, and it takes a team effort, so thank you very much. And for those that are watching the webcast, I would encourage anyone to, if they have any questions in respect to our response to COVID-19, if they could email us at information@sydney.ca, or call us at our dedicated information line, which is 250-655-6900. Now I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Humble and Chief Mickelson. Do council members have any questions for our EOC leadership? Councillor O'Keefe, you have the floor.
Mr. Mayor, you can hear me okay?
Yes.
So, no, it's more of a comment, I guess, in regards to the website, and just wanted to compliment the team on the good job that they've done there in terms of organizing the information. And one thing I would point that I thought was of particular interest for citizens who might be listening is the child page that you have there for how Sydney residents can help. And there's some good ideas there about supporting local restaurants, about some of the work Beacon Community Services is doing. So good work on the website, and just encourage citizens to go and look at some of the ways that they can help during this crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Are any other council members have a question or a comment? Councillor Garnett. Ms. Donick, or Nelson, sorry. Councillor Garnett's microphone is not on. Can you do yours?
There we go. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just want to acknowledge and thank the people in the EOC for the tremendous job with the truck stop. I mean, it's amazing to see that we got national attention on that. I've been following CBC nationally and locally throughout all of this, and to see our name and to see the praise put upon you guys for the decision to do that is fabulous. It's just a great thing to do for people that we normally don't think about. Truck drivers is one of those occupations that we don't think how important they are, and they are extremely important. And it's a valuable service and effort that our EOC put forth for these people. So it's just a real good thanks and shout out to you guys.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from council colleagues? Seeing none, I just want to extend my thanks on behalf of council to our EOC leadership, Mr. Humble and Chief Mickelson. Thank you very much. So the next on our agenda is public participation period. As members of the public may be aware, over the last few weeks, we've informed the public that due to restrictions imposed on public gatherings by the medical health officer, council meetings will be closed to the public until further notice. However, we have put in place that public meetings will be live streamed for public viewing as they are this evening. They'll also be continue to be available on the website for video viewing at a later date. At this time, the public may submit their comments or questions to council via email at admin@sydney.ca prior to 12 noon on the day of a meeting. And please note in your email that it is intended for public participation period, and we will read aloud your correspondence in the meeting. So having none this evening, we'll move on to presentations. This evening we have a presentation from a liquor license application, the Cut Cartel, which is located at 2425 Bevan Avenue. And we have a brief presentation by Anna Thomas, the owner of Cut Cartel Barbers. Good evening, Ms. Thomas. Are you able to join us?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, wonderful. Hi. Thank you so much for taking the time during all of this to look at our liquor license application. My name is Anna Thomas. I'm one of the owners of the Cartel Barbers Lounge here in Sydney. I've been living and working as a stylist in Sydney for the last 10 years. During this time, there has been a noticeable shift in the diversity of our population. We do have a growing number of young families in Sydney now. Many of the men in their 20s, 30s, and 40s began driving to over the past years for higher-end barbering services, as there's no shops like that on the peninsula. In October of 2018, my partner Darren Enns and I decided to build a unique barbershop to fill this need market. The Cut Cartel opened its doors in February of 2019, in the past year. We have successfully brought back a large number of these men to our shop in Sydney. The Cut Cartel Barbers is an old-school, traditional barbershop offering timeless barbering services, such as hot shaves, beard trims, precision cuts, and fades. We provide retail men's grooming products, which are sourced locally, provincially, and nationally. But more than this, we want to be a gathering place for our community in our lounge-style space. Our clients come for an experience, not just a haircut or a shave. We want people to enjoy the services we provide and never feel rushed out the door. The Cut Cartel is a rest stop from daily life and time out. Since we have this great social media platform, I'd like to take the opportunity to give you a bit of a virtual tour of our shop. If you look over here, you can see we have a fully functioning coffee bar where we serve our clients complimentary beverages, coffee, tea, water, pop. We also built this in hopes that we would be able to serve beer and spirit at some point along the line in our progress of our business. You can see here we have pretty barber chairs. We do employ 5 barbers, 3 full-time and 2 part-time. We offer our clients the opportunity to play pool before and after their services. And we get a lot of families in who, dads who bring in their sons and they like to play there. We also have this seating area with games for the kids, books and magazines, and we offer free Wi-Fi for our clients to enjoy while they're hanging out here. We have 3 TVs, which we stream all the sporting events from. So that's another fun thing for our clients. We really tried to just create a unique and funky space that Sydney doesn't have at this time. So currently we do offer our space for private function. Do groomsmen parties like getting ready before the wedding. We do office get-togethers, networking events. We hosted Chamber of Commerce here before, and that's been really well received. As many of you probably know already, provincial liquor laws were changed, were revised in 2017 to to allow salon spas and barbershops to provide better service to customers. Due to the huge cost and lengthy application process, only a handful of shops have implemented this service on Vancouver Island. I know for sure there's one in Victoria, and I believe there's one on Island. Larger cities in our country, such as Vancouver, Montreal, Ottawa, Toronto, have successfully introduced beer and spirit service sales. The Cocktail Barbers Lounge would like Sydney to be at the forefront of this growing trend. Liquor service in barbershops has been available in many other countries around the world for years. So we've had actually a great response from our clientele over this past year regarding this application. I hope that you received the package of signatures I dropped off just before this COVID outbreak. I do have another 150 here. These were all collected within like 5 weeks, I believe, that I wasn't able to bring in, unfortunately. I would say probably 80 to 90% of our clients or adult customers would like to be able to enjoy a beer or whiskey with their service. On a daily basis, we are asked, when will we get a liquor license? And it's been a year now of going through the years, and we're just so excited to be able to present to you in our hometown. Our intention is not to be a bar or a nightclub. We simply want to be a barbershop that offers a beer or a drink with service. We are not a huge space. We have a capacity of 50, which is crowded. We've had when we've had private functions. I don't foresee any change in the amount of noise or disruption to the surrounding areas, as we have a limit. We would like to limit our drink service to one max to a client during their visit. We will ensure our staff all have the serving it right. The serving it right cards, which will provide the needed skill to control the consumption of liquor and patron behavior. Our policy will be that 2 staff members be on duty at all times, both for their individual safety and for the safety of our clients. Due to the limited size of this establishment, we believe it will be easy to limit the noise and the volume of patrons. We intend to post signage by our exit door and in our parking lot to reduce the number of the amount of noise to our neighbors. Currently, our hours of operation are 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Tuesday to Saturday. If approved for the beverage service, we would like to extend our hours to no later than 8 to provide more time for our customers to enjoy the space after work. The cartel believes in supporting our local community. It is our intention to serve only locally brewed and distilled spirits from Victoria's Distillery here in Sydney and Category 12 Brewing on the Peninsula. In closing, I'd like to add that in the past year we've held many private functions with up to 50 guests using special event liquor permits with no incidents, complaints, or disruptions to our neighborhood. Again, we'd like to thank you for your time and consideration of our proposal to provide liquor service at the Cartel Barbers Lounge. We believe this service will not only benefit our business, but the local producers of the liquor products and our community as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thomas, for your presentation. I'll now turn it to council members if they have any questions. Councillor Garnett?
Hi, thank you for the presentation. Just out of curiosity, you mentioned you've had events in the past. I'm wondering about the live music aspect. Was there live music present at those particular instances?
We haven't actually done that yet. That was our initial idea when we were building this business. I'm not sure that we can facilitate that at this time in our space. If someone did want to come
Okay, Ms. Thomas? Ms. Thomas, your audio quality has deteriorated.
Oh.
If you want to try and if you want to try.
Is that any better?
We're getting a warning that your bandwidth is low. If you could just turn off your video, and then
Okay.
it'll be a little approved.
We had to cancel our internet here in the shop for COVID. Hang on, stop. Okay, maybe that'll help. And I'll go outside. Is that any better?
Yes, thank you. And so I think you were asking you were answering Councillor Garnett's question with regards to if you had live music at previous gatherings.
We have not yet offered any live music. It's a little bit of a small space. When we had originally intended that, we hadn't really laid out the space. If we were to have any live music, it would mostly be like a acoustic guitar or perhaps a singer with a guitar. And definitely not during the business hours of our pharmacy across the breezeway. We don't want to interrupt them in their business hours.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rintoul.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Anna, for your presentation and for the information you've provided us. This is something I'm just not aware of. You spoke a little bit about your business model and having, a family environment and having a dad and son in to the premises. Does a liquor primary license change your ability to have kids in the premises while you're serving alcohol? That's just for my information, Anna, if you don't mind. I don't know the answer to that.
No, it does not. It states that because we are not, our focus of our business is not alcohol, but it is an add-on to our service, then we are allowed to have children. I did do my research on that because we do have people of all ages. I thought our target market would be mostly men between 20 and 50, but I have all ages here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from council members? Seeing none, thank you, Ms. Thomas, for your presentation. As you may know, council will be considering your application as item 13C. That will be a little ways down on the agenda. We do have a number of other items to proceed with before getting to that again.
Okay, may I just add one thing?
Certainly.
If it would help, we're very happy to limit the service of our alcohol to certain times, if that is better for the town, if they feel that that's, if we were to only offer it from 6 till 8 or something, we would be happy to comply with whatever you would like to do.
Very good. Thank you for that information as well.
Okay, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll now move to bylaws, and we have under item 5A1, bylaw number 2189, which is regarding bylaw enforcement officers amendment number 1, to exclusively appoint the persons assigned to the positions of senior building official, and fire inspector as bylaw enforcement officers for the town. And we have a staff recommendation. I should mention before we go to the staff recommendation that under the emergency declaration, state of emergency by the province, it has allowed us to change our council procedure bylaws such that we can introduce, give first, second, and third reading and final adoption at the same council meeting. So we would need to proceed through separate motions for the first 3 meetings and then a 4th motion for adoption if we choose that route.
With that in mind, Mr. Mayor, I will move first reading.
Second.
All in favor? Motion carries.
And I will move second reading.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
And I will move third reading.
Second.
Any discussion? I'll call a question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you.
And I will move adoption.
Second.
All those in favor? None opposed. Motion carries. Thank you. And so item 5A2 is, as we mentioned during the agenda, is moving to item 13B2. And so I'll now move to item 13B1. Sorry. I'll now move to development permits and development variance permits in item 5B1. is Development Variance Permit Application Number DV 100295 at 10216 Rabinia Place, which is to reduce the rear setback for protected tree in order to construct a two-story, two-family dwelling. And I'll turn it to staff. Do we have a presentation from Mr. Dave Stevens of Lido Homes this evening?
Hi, I guess that's me. We don't have a presentation per se, but we do have myself and Natalie Saunders are both in this meeting. And if there's any questions from council or anybody else, we're more than happy to answer your questions.
Well, thank you for joining the meeting this evening, and thank you for the full package that we do have in our, along with our full staff report in our council package this evening. I'll turn to my council colleagues and ask if there are any questions of the proponent, having reviewed the material. Okay, seeing none, thank you, Mr. Stevens. We'll proceed with our deliberations, and please listen in. And so we do have a report and a recommendation.
I'll move the recommendation that owners and tenants in occupation of property within 75 meters, that's 246 feet, of 10216 Robinia Place be notified regarding development variance application number DV 100295 to vary the required minimum rear setback, and that any written correspondence received be forwarded to council at the time of consideration of approval of the variance.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? I think just for the public's benefit, perhaps through to staff, we could just have a very brief synopsis of the reason for this variance request.
Do you want me to answer that question?
No, thanks. I'm just going to ask staff to quickly summarize their report, and which will be available to the public who are viewing on live stream or may wish to view it another time.
What's working? Yes, so there are two trees in and around this proposed dwelling duplex. One of the trees was quite close to the north corner of the house. It's a protected tree by the bylaw. Staff would, as far as we're aware, it's in very good condition, and we'd like to see it remain on the property. The building envelope is very close to that tree, and in order to preserve the tree and keep it as healthy as possible, a slight shifting backward of the building envelope is necessary.
Great, thank you. I'll just comment that I'm in support of the recommendation. I think the town's recently completed urban forest strategy speaks to the importance of trees in our community. We do see infill development elsewhere in our community, where on some of the smaller lots there are setbacks that are a little smaller. I'll also note in this neighborhood there is mature trees on neighboring properties as well, and so I think going out to the community with notice to hear their feedback is a good step at this time. Any other comment or questions from council? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for joining us this evening. We'll now turn to item 5B2, which is development permit application number DP 100816 and development variance permit application number DV 100294, which is 9805 Seaport Place, which was to reduce the required side interior setback in order to construct a roof over a restaurant patio area, and this was for the new restaurant that will be on the ground floor of the Pier Hotel complex. And we have considered this previously at a previous council meeting, and we do have a letter from the applicant and a recommendation.
I'll move receipt for information.
Second.
Any discussion? So just to summarize for the benefit of the public, given the current circumstances, the proponent is asked to withdraw the application at this time. And at such time that they do wish to move forward again, council had previously passed a motion to go to request for public input, a notice for public input, and we would proceed with that step at that time. But it's unknown at this time when that would occur. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. Thank you. We'll now move to adoption of minutes. We have two sets of minutes, our regular council meeting of March the 23rd, 2020, and our special council meeting of March the 26th, 2020.
I'll move the minutes be adopted.
Second.
Any errors or omissions? I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. We'll now move to business arising from previous minutes, and so this is for information only. There's no resolution necessary at this stage, but as per our regular council in-camera meeting of March 23rd, 2020, council did make appointments to the OCP Review Advisory Committee, and we passed resolutions that the applications from the following citizens be approved and that they be appointed to the OCP Review Advisory Committee. And those seven individuals from the public are Gay Van Siri, Todd Wiebe, Denny Jelena, Bernadine Vandermeer, David Calverley, Hannah Nawaroth, and Marie Savage. So congratulations to those individuals for volunteering to serve on that committee. In these new circumstances, we're not quite certain when that new committee will have its meeting. I would expect it would be in the coming weeks, and we'll certainly be in touch. But I want to take a moment to thank the large number of applicants from around the community who did apply. It was certainly challenging going through the process with so many qualified individuals, and thank you for your applications. No, we did that. Yeah. So we don't have any petitions or delegations this evening, so I'd now like to turn to my mayor's report. For many weeks now, all of us in our community have been adapting to enormous changes in our lives due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the vital measures various levels of government and health officers have put in place. I want to give sincere thanks to our first responders, to our ambulance drivers, to our paramedics, to our fire responders, to our police, who are continuing to provide the services that our community expects every day, but in this health pandemic are on the front lines working with the public. And to our frontline health workers throughout the community and throughout the facilities, thank you. To those serving the public and the important services that are being maintained, we appreciate and thank you often. I'm inspired by many in our community who are volunteering their time and energy to assist those who are more at risk in our community. Our community spirit is very strong. I see evidence every day of that. Just coming out of my neighborhood over the weekend, one of our neighbors painted the Canadian flag with a heart over his entire double garage door. And I can't help but smile as I see my neighbors doing when we leave the neighborhood and you drive past a 7-foot heart on the side of a garage. So we should be encouraged and optimistic that the measures we are taking are making a difference in flattening the curve. We are turning our minds. I want to thank Mr. Humble for the time he spent in this evening's report to speak of recovery. We are turning our minds to recovery. I want to assure the community that we have the benefit in Sydney, as many other communities do, of having emergency plans that have developed and evolved over the last 10 years. And there are other examples in the province, whether it was fires, whether it was floods, where there was a lot of recovery to occur in a community. And our emergency plans have benefited from that experience and the people we've consulted with. And so in terms of recovery for our town services, whether they be the everyday services of building permits or they be the capital projects that we want to undertake, we'll recover and we'll get back on track with those projects. to our community facilities, our recreation center, our Mary Winspear Community Center, to the Shoal Senior Center, to our library, to our museum, to the aquarium of the Salish Sea, to our Arts Council gallery and facility, and to others in community. The town of Sydney is a partner in terms of funding, and we will find our way to reopen and come back strong in our community facilities. As well, to the numerous nonprofit organizations that put on a large number of community events during the year. We close the town's Beacon Avenue some 25 times a year for parades, for the summer markets, for the bed races, for Family Day, for Treat Street. We'll find our way again. We may not be able to have a number of these events this year in 2020, but we'll find our way and we'll bring those community events back in a safe manner to our community. I think we should take pride in what we are accomplishing individually and together. It will take time, but as we continue to pull together, we will come out of this a strong and vibrant community. So thank you, everyone. I'd now like to turn to staff reports, and we have a very important staff report 13A, which are options to reduce our 2020 property tax impacts. This arose from a notice of motion from council a couple of weeks ago, and I'd now like to turn to Mr. Andrew Hissick, our Chief Financial Officer, to introduce this item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For those who have the agenda in front of them, I'll essentially be paraphrasing what's in the report itself. Obviously, I'm here to also answer questions at the end, but I'll first highlight the report as written. So, as you're aware, Council had approved the town's 2020 to 24 financial plan back in February, and that plan had projected a general property tax increase of 1.79%. However, in response to the unprecedented financial impacts of the current COVID-19 pandemic, Council made the recent resolution to have another look. So in response to that request to reduce the tax impact, staff have modeled 5 different scenarios for consideration, and those are: 1, the approved 1.79% impact as approved, just as a base scenario for comparison. Number 2, the impacts with the general tax increase rolled back to 0 across the board. Scenario 3, with no general tax increase plus an additional 5% reduction for commercial and industrial properties. Scenario 4, which is no general increase plus an additional 10% reduction for commercial industrial. And finally, scenario 5, a 5% tax reduction across the board. Since that time, I've also modeled one more, which is a 1% tax impact across the board, and I could speak to that if required. So also included in your agenda package are 4 appendices which attempt to quantify the impacts of each of the scenarios. And I'll be referring primarily to appendices C and D for those impacts.
If we could mute.
Oh.
Thank you.
So under scenario 1, I just modeled the impact on the average residential property as well as the average commercial property of the 1.79% tax increase. Now, it's important to note in those comparisons that the tax rates are not yet available for provincial school taxes, nor for the transit levy. What we do know about the school taxes, however, is that the province has announced a 50% reduction in school taxes for commercial and light industrial properties. So regardless of what we do, those properties will receive a fairly substantial break on a big chunk of their tax notice. So under the base scenario, the tax impact for the average residential property would have been $27 for municipal taxes only, plus an additional $14 for other jurisdictions. And this is before we know the impact of school taxes and the transit levy on the average residential property. The base scenario for the average commercial property would result in an overall decrease of an estimated $1,489, and that's entirely due to the large reduction in school taxes that's anticipated. Under scenario 2, which essentially eliminates the general tax increase and brings it down to zero, the municipal taxes would be the same as last year for the average property. Now, it's important to note that even though we say zero increase for the average, that clearly will not apply to every residential property because of the annual redistribution that happens through the valuation, the assessment process. However, for most properties, their change up or down will be very close to the average, and they'll see a slight decrease or a slight increase over what they paid last year if we go with this scenario. For the average commercial property, having a 0% tax increase would lead to a reduction in their municipal portion of taxes by about 104, but that is slightly overstated due to the fact that we apply the same rate to commercial and light industrial. And I'm not going to get into the details of that, just so you know that the impact won't be as significant if we reduce the commercial tax increase to zero. Under scenario 3, which is 0% increase for residential, 5% reduction for commercial, we're looking at an additional $6 impact for residential to bring it up to a total of $20, and all that is related to taxes for other jurisdictions. Now, a 5% reduction in taxes for the business class would result in additional savings of about $291 for in municipal taxes, and another $62 in CRD and library taxes for the average business. Under scenario 4, it's essentially double the reduction for commercial. So in essence, those savings for commercial would double. So combined with the school tax savings, the average commercial property would see an overall decrease of over $2,300 over last year's taxes. Moving on to scenario 5, it's a 5% reduction in taxes applied evenly across all property classes. And under this scenario, the average residential property would see a $76 reduction in municipal taxes and a total reduction of $62 overall. And for the average commercial property would be essentially the same as under scenario 3. So if we were to approve one of these reductions, how would we fund it? So the 5 scenarios modeled in the report would lead to an overall reduction in property tax revenues of between $216,000 and $819,000. And the staff recommendation is that this loss of tax revenue be offset in the financial plan through an additional allocation of surplus. We're proposing that the expenditure side of the budget be left alone for now. We fund it all from surplus, and as we go throughout this year and we have a better idea of how long this pandemic will last and how much it'll impact our operations, we'll report back to council on how we might reduce some of our expenditures in the budget to reduce the amount of additional surplus we're taking out. So for the time being, it should be a funding side change and no change to the expenditure side. So if, as a result of additional budget amendments throughout the year, as well as the actual operating results for this year, we see additional operating savings, those could be reflected in the tax impacts for 2021 and beyond. So in terms of additional financial impacts, it's important to note that since virtually all of our revenues come from either property taxes or utility fees, we do not have the same flexibility and ability as senior governments do to provide assistance. So the province and the federal government, they have a much wider ranging revenue sources, and that allows them to provide a wider range of relief measures. So it's important also that to note that the municipality provides essential services to its residents and businesses, and these must be sustained for the longer term while allowing for a measure of relief in the immediate term. and any tax reduction approved for 2020 will impact the tax increases for future years. So if we start from a lower base, then dealing with our revenue needs for next year could mean a bigger impact. However, council will have the opportunity to look at next year's budget as a way to maybe smooth out that impact for future years. So with that having been said, if council has any further questions, I'm prepared to answer them.
Okay, before we look for a motion, I'll open the floor to any council members who have questions of Mr. Hisik. So we have no questions. Councillor Garnett?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You mentioned another scenario that you had contemplated, so it'd be nice to take a look at that just to see what it entails.
Okay. So you should see on your screen that one of the appendices that shows the impacts of the various scenarios has been expanded to add one more, which I call 2020-6. So that shows that with a 1% tax increase across the board, for the average residential property, that would mean a reduction in municipal taxes of $15 over last year. And combined with the increases for other jurisdictions, you're looking at overall a $1 decrease from the 2019 level for the average property. Now moving over to the commercial side, as you imagine, it's a smaller increase than scenario 5 would be, because we're taking that 5% reduction and dividing it in 5 essentially. So they'd be looking at a $58 reduction in their municipal taxes.
Okay, does that help, Councillor Grant? I just wanted to see it. Oh, no, that's good, that's good. Okay, I have a question and then, and perhaps then a comment. If you could confirm, Mr. Hisik, that based on the budget that council approved, the 2020 portion of, we approved a 5-year budget earlier this spring in February, but of course we paid most attention to the 2020 portion of the year of the budget, and that we would be collecting approximately $12.3 million from residential and commercial taxpayers this year under that approved budget.
That's correct. That's in municipal taxes. When you look at the total tax bill, it would be roughly twice that amount.
Yes. And of the portion, I think the split between residential and commercial is approximately 3.3 million for commercial and the remainder for residential.
So under the approved budget, yes, you're right. On combined commercial and light industrial would generate 3.381 million, and residential about 8.7.
Okay. The reason I draw attention to my colleagues and to the public to this is what the overall tax, tax base is for residents and business, but what portion the commercial the commercial businesses in our community pay. And that has an impact in the decision that we're making tonight from this perspective. And I might ask my council colleagues and those who are able, if they're watching live stream, to turn to Appendix D, which is the 5 scenarios for commercial tax payers. And I'll draw your attention to the near bottom right figure of total tax bill in 2019 of $12,425. So again, in terms of us being able to make a decision, we have to look at what the average commercial tax bill is, and that's what it was in 2019. Of course, we know there is actually an extreme or a very large variance. There are very small businesses that pay literally a tenth or less of that average tax bill, and there are very large, significant taxpayers who literally pay 10 times what that average amount is. But from a perspective and in terms of talking about percentage changes, we can speak to what the average commercial tax bill is and make decisions or make comparisons. And so I'll then draw attention with knowing that the average tax bill last year was that amount, that in the 5 scenarios that Mr. Hissick has presented, and I would now draw your attention to the first scenario, the first column, 2020 number 1, and that's under the scenario of the approved budget we have, the budget we've approved earlier this year, where there would be a 1.79% tax increase across both residential taxpayers and commercial taxpayers. And just before I explain that, or go to the bottom of that column, I want to draw attention also to the fact, as residents know who've received tax bills in the past, and businesses, that there is actually 10 different taxes on your tax bill. A very significant portion is the municipal taxes, the Town of Sydney taxes, and that shows at the top of the appendix we're dealing with. Very large also is the school taxes, but the school board sets those taxes independently of the town. The town does collect them and then remit them to the school board. So those are 2 key taxes. We then have taxes from other governments, which include the Capital Regional District General Tax, the Capital Regional Hospital District Tax, BC Assessment Authority Tax, the Municipal Finance Authority Tax, the Regional Transit Levy, and the Regional Library Tax. So all of those 6 taxes are set by other bodies outside of the Town of Sydney, but again, the Town of Sydney collects those from the residents and remits those to those various bodies. And then lastly, we have 2 other town taxes, the water parcel tax and the sewer parcel tax. And as we communicated earlier this year when we approved our budget, there is no change this year to the water parcel tax or the sewer parcel tax at $65 and $130 respectively. So I mention that because now I'm going to refer to a person's overall tax bill with the best information that we have today. And the best information we have today we do not know what the school tax increase will be, and we do not know what the regional transit levy tax will be, though the town will be notified that in the coming 2 or 3 weeks, and we would then be including that on the tax bill that we issue later in the spring. However, with the best information we have, if you were to add up all of the taxes increases or decreases this year with the 1.79% increase, and the fact that the province has already announced a 50% reduction in school taxes for commercial taxpayers, then commercial businesses would save $1,489, would pay $1,489 less than they paid last year, and that represents a 12% decrease. So that's with a 1.79% municipal tax, but with the significant impact of the province reducing the school taxes. If we go to column 2, which is the proposed going from 1.79% municipal tax increase to a 0% tax increase, that same school board reduction in tax increases, businesses on average would save $1,593, and compared to their tax bill last year, that would be a 12.8% reduction in actual taxes. If we go to the third column, and the third column proposes reducing the 1.79% tax increase to 0 for both residential property taxpayers and commercial taxpayers. It includes the significant decrease of the school board tax for commercial businesses from the province. But what it does is we are shifting some of the tax burden from the commercial taxpayer to residences. And the impact of that, by making a 5% reduction for commercial businesses, would mean they would save $1,945. They would pay $1,945 less than last year, which would be a 15.6% decrease over their tax bill last year. Now that's on average. What would it mean if we shift that tax burden from the commercial taxpayer to the residential taxpayer? And I come back to the question I asked earlier in terms of We're talking about the commercial tax base pays $3.3 million, and the residential tax base pays $8.7 million, or close to that. Mr. Hiss?
Sorry to interrupt your train of thought here. I just want to make it clear that for scenarios 3 and 4, when we're talking about a 5 or 10% reduction for commercial, that is purely lost revenue to the town. I'm not proposing that we shift that to residential. So it's just lost revenue. We're not making it up by collecting it from another property class. That's the way it's been modeled. However, it will impact what you're speaking of, which is the percentage coming from each class of property.
Okay, so I thank you for that clarification, and but it would be if I'll stay with the commercial taxpayer for a moment. It would be if we reduced it by 5%, it would be a 15.6% decrease for the average commercial taxpayer versus last year, and I think that's quite significant. If we go to scenario 4, which is a 10% decrease, that would result in an 18.5% decrease to last year's actual taxes. So I wanted to put that in perspective. And now I have a question for Mr. Hissick, now that he's corrected me on one of the points I made. And that is, if I turn to Appendix C, Mr. Hissick, and I go to column 3, the -5, we are increasing the average residential tax bill from $14.24 to $20.45.
That's correct, and that's entirely due to the impact of, if we don't increase every class by the same percentage, it'll impact the tax multiple, which is the ratio of the commercial rate to the residential rate. So if we do that by applying a larger decrease to commercial, then the residential property, the average, will be paying a little bit more for regional district tax as well as library tax, because those two multiples are impacted by our own.
Thank you. And you did state that in your report, that that increase arises primarily, if not entirely, from the tax increase shifting to with the other government taxes.
Right.
Not the municipal tax.
Right, yes.
So I stand corrected there. Thank you. So there would be a point, and doing the same calculation where the average tax bill to a resident last year before the homeowner grant was $3,256, with a 5% reduction of commercial taxes, which doesn't shift, as I've been corrected, doesn't shift to the residents, but with the 1.79% to 0, it would be a 0.63% increase by that slight shift in the other Capital Regional District and other taxes. So I just wanted to put that in context of what commercial taxpayers could actually would be looking at in terms of what I would consider to be a substantial, tangible tax decrease. A large portion of that is being provided by the province with the 50% reduction in commercial taxes. However, the town is contributing by reducing the tax impact from 1.79 to 0 from this tax increase, and by then a further 5% decrease in actual commercial taxes. And I'll turn to my councillor colleagues if they have any questions on that or other comments. Councillor Rintoul.
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Mr. Hissick, for giving us options to consider. I think it's an important step that we're taking here this evening. To the mayor's last point with regards to changes with respect to the residential tax bill, I would just point out that any savings or going back to a 0% increase is still less than what they would have been facing with our initial budget. And so I'm inclined to be more supportive of the fourth option, which would allow for the 0% general tax increase, but as well as a 10% general tax decrease for commercial and light industrial properties. I won't speak further to it at this moment. I'd certainly like to see what my other council colleagues feel about that fourth scenario. And I think I'm supportive of that in that it's providing the greatest relief to businesses and commercial enterprises in the town of Sydney, those who employ, those who are facing a real tough time in the current environment. So I'm definitely leaning that direction at this point, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Garnett?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I concur with Councillor Rintoul. I was looking at what could have the best impact for our commercial. But as I understand, Mr. Hisik, that doesn't necessarily impact the people who are renting from, but you would hope that maybe they would help along their people that are running businesses out of their buildings. But yeah, I'd also like to hear from those who aren't in attendance to hear what they have to say, and I see Peter's hand up, so.
Yeah, Councillor Wainwright, I'll turn to you in just a moment, but to Councillor Garnett's point, if I may add, so very common in the town of Sydney, in most retail service areas, tenants pay what is called triple net rent. And so what they do is they pay a basic rent, they pay taxes for the property, for their portion of the taxes. So if there is a commercial building on Beacon Avenue, and let's just say it's split up into three different businesses, and so it's one commercial property, it receives one tax notice, but the owner of that property will divide the tax bill amongst the three tenants, usually on a proportional basis of the square footage. Other factors can be considered. Insurance is the third part of triple net. What we would expect if we were this benefit reduction in tax went to the property tax owner, that they would be passing it on to their tenants, the operating businesses. Councillor Wainwright.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'll start off by saying I support the idea of reducing our general tax increase to at least 0. Then I guess in thinking about what we do with this, the one thing that is that I think we need to keep in mind is that we have very limited flexibility in terms of how we apply property taxes. So so we have people who are facing some real hardship and are going to have trouble paying their taxes, and we also have people who aren't going to be having any difficulty. And we can't provide relief for those who are facing the hardship without also providing relief for those who don't need it. In an ideal world, you would apply the tax to the people who can afford it, and you would give relief to those who are facing the hardship. And that actually sounds like an income tax as opposed to a property tax. And it's the senior governments who are in the best position to provide relief to those who need it and have and expect the people who can afford to pay to be the ones providing the funds for that relief. So I continue to think that our best course of action is to very strongly lobby the senior governments to step in, because they have the power to provide relief to the businesses and residences that need it, and apply the normal rules to those who aren't facing that kind of hardship. I appreciate, though, we're faced with having to make a decision without knowing how the senior governments are going to go. I appreciate that our business, our commercial and light industrial properties are facing significant challenges. Some of our residents are as well. Being out of work and not having the means to meet their expenses, likely facing some real hardship with property taxes. I favor providing relief to everybody, and I'm inclined to go beyond the cutting it to a 0% increase. I don't support going as far as rolling back taxes by 5%. I would be more inclined to look at a number of 1%. And I don't support going as far as option 4 of cutting the commercial taxes by 10%. I could go along with 5%. One of the things that is a challenge is, and the mayor has mentioned, we have no guarantee that the property owner is going to pass on this tax saving to the tenant. And I appreciate that a lot of them do have triple net, where we can expect that tax saving will get passed on. But there are a significant number in Sydney who don't have a lease structured like that. And I think we're also aware that some of the property owners or their property management companies that represent them are pretty mercenary and probably won't pass it on. So that makes me reluctant to go as far as a 10% benefit to commercial. One of the other things I'm concerned about is the recovery end of things. I appreciate that we're keeping all of the expenditure part of our budget intact, at least at this point. But I'm thinking along the lines of actually adding some expenses to our budget, stimulus expenditures, to try to kickstart our economy when things do finally start to loosen up. And that's not stuff that's currently in our budget. So I don't want us to cut our revenues to the point where we don't have an opportunity to do that. And that's why I'm being hesitant to go with that scenario 4. Well, actually not hesitant. I won't support scenario 4 or scenario 5. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to Councillor O'Keefe in just a moment. I just want to make add a comment, if you will, appreciating your comments, that businesses, commercial businesses, pay in addition to these 10 taxes that are collected by the municipality on behalf of the municipality and other authorities. They of course pay provincial income tax and federal income tax. But in a situation where a business has a loss in a given year, it does not have to pay federal income tax or provincial income tax. However, it still has to pay its municipal tax. It has to pay its full municipal tax bill. And while I appreciate that the federal government has put in a number, and provincial government have put in a number of support programs, very substantial, totaling many, many billions, tens of billions of dollars, in place for primarily employees through EI, through the emergency benefit, and others, which is a replacement, at least a partial replacement of the income for those employees. And that's something that the federal government in particular, and the provincial government to a certain degree, can do and can do very effectively. However, what the federal government and provincial government have not done, and there is really not a precedent for doing it, is it cannot replace the lost income to a business owner. If a business owner loses $1,000, $10,000, $100,000 in sales, there has never been an income support program to a business owner to say this replaces your income. And so what the measures the federal government and the provincial government are trying to do, and what I think we are trying to do as a municipality, and we're trying to find the appropriate level, is we are trying to reduce business expenses. Because they don't have the income, because they won't get a direct income replacement, we are trying to, different levels of government are trying to bring in relief in terms of expenses. And so we have seen the province step up and reduce the school tax for commercial taxpayers quite significantly. And we're proposing, we have a range of options before us. The federal government has put in an employee wage subsidy of 75%. Well, wages is a significant expense for employers, and so that is contributing to an expense helping to contribute to expense. But some of the large expenses that businesses have, and rent is one of the largest, particular for businesses that are on, the type of businesses that are on Beacon Avenue, is the best the federal government has been able to do to date is offer a $40,000 interest-free loan program until the end of 2022. Well, that puts a business owner in the position of taking on additional debt, even if it's interest-free, when they don't know what their prospects are for future income to repay that loan or to make up the other expenses they already have. And so I'm in favor and certainly want to turn to my colleagues in terms of what we think the appropriate level is. But I think that we do have a place at the municipal level to try and reduce the expenses to business owners. And I appreciate we can't do it, as Councillor Wainwright very reasonably pointed out, we can't go and do it by application whether or not a particular business needs the assistance or not. This isn't across the board. But I can say the vast majority of businesses in our community do need support. Yes, grocery stores or other like businesses may be doing a very good business. They certainly have additional expenses the way they're having to operate these days. But the vast majority of businesses are doing that. And I would take some comfort, or I would like to be optimistic in my experience in business for some 30 odd years, that the vast majority of landlords would in fact pass on the benefits to their tenants. But Councillor O'Keefe, I'll now turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I support some tax relief to the business community. I'll say right off the bat, in terms of the options presented, I'm leaning more to option number 3, so 0% tax increase plus 5% to commercial. That's about, I think, the most that I would be comfortable with. For a number of reasons, some that have been commented on already. For example, the fact that we have to apply this across the board so that those that need it the most might not necessarily get as much as we would like, and those that are doing really well will benefit when they don't need it. Also, concern as well about whether this decrease would be passed along to those businesses that are renting the premises. The other thing I'm thinking about is in terms of the loss of this revenue, and when I look at the amount that the revenue change for option 3, it's $381,000 roughly dollars. That seems to be an amount that we can deal with reasonably well within our surplus. Anything larger than that, I think, is going to be obviously a bit more difficult. The other thing I just want to mention is that, when we're using the surplus is fine, but I'm a little concerned about if we have to, I think we should also be looking at how we're going to reduce operational expenses in the town as well. So I'm not in favor of a situation where we would be having a 0% increase this year, and that automatically meant that we were going to have to bump up the increase next year significantly to cover off the loss of revenue. Because if we do something like that, there's really no point in this at all, because there's only one taxpayer, as we've heard before, and so even if we give them a break this year, I don't want to be clawing it back again with increased taxes next year. So what I'd like to be seeing from town staff at some point is what sort of measures can the town take to reduce our operational expenses? And I'm not talking about just deferring projects or, putting things on hold for a while. I'm talking about ways that we can actually decrease our operational expenditures. Maybe it means that there's some level of service that has to be cut, some things that maybe don't get done as frequently. So those are some of the things I'd like us to be considering at some point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I would make the comment that if you are going to reduce expenditures and not just shift capital projects that are primarily reserve funded to another year, it's going to be a direct reduction of service somewhere in our community. And of course, we have essential services that we wouldn't dare to consider reducing, and it would take a hard look, as we do through our annual budget process, to look at where other operational areas that we would be able to reduce expense. Sorry, Councillor Duncan. Sorry, I didn't quite see your hand there, but please go ahead.
Thanks. I guess now that everybody else has thrown their numbers out, I would say I'm most in agreement with Councillor O'Keefe's numbers. I appreciate Councillor Rainwright's attempt to try and pass on a decrease to the residents as well, but I'm looking just over here, Mr. Hissick's table. It saves, it's hard to see the bottom numbers, sorry, maybe $15 a year. Thank you. So from scenario 6 there with the 1% decrease versus scenario 3, okay, so about $20 a year, which is not going to be the difference for somebody being able to make their groceries or something because they weren't able to pay their taxes. However, it's going to be a large chunk of money for the town. If I'm following the other table here where it says how much we'd be taking out of our reserves, scenario 3, we're looking at roughly $380,000. Scenario 6, if we do that 1%, we're bumping it up near $600,000 coming out of our reserve. And our surplus that we have to play with here is about $800,000, which brings us pretty close to emptying that out. And this is not going to be a V-shaped recovery, as they keep saying. We're looking at people being substantially poorer for 2 years, and that's pretty optimistic. 3, 4, we're going to need extra money for quite some time, and probably, like Councillor O'Keefe says, to examine cutting what we can cut, because if we're looking at perfectly manicured parks down at the Inner Harbor and the second Great Depression with people living in tar paper shacks again, I don't think that makes much sense. So we have to talk about it eventually, as we get a better idea of how long this will go on and how deep our unemployment is going to be. But for now, I'm quite happy with scenario 3 as is presented here.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Hissick. The table you gave us showing how much of a hit it would be for each of the scenarios, because of rely on your expertise, what is your comfort level with each of those said scenarios in terms of the amount of money that would take out of our revenue?
There are no scenarios here that I couldn't support. So while the more we forego on revenues, the harder it might be to recover later, there's nothing here that we can't bear. And in terms of previous comments that were just made, we're trying to find the right balance between helping out now and not crippling us in the future, because as we know, Council has a very ambitious work plan over the next 3 years. So the more we cut now, the less we'll be able to accomplish in that work plan.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, thank you,
Certainly.
Mr. Hsick. I guess I'm just, it's a very difficult situation, and I'm trying to think we can do what's best, and I'm thinking of the businesses in our community and how they're suffering. They're sort of last to the table to get help, and fairly weeks out yet by the sounds of it for the wage subsidy that it passed, but it's going to be weeks before they can get it. So I think anything we can do in the interim to help them, to assist them, especially a lot of the smaller businesses who employ a lot of our people in our community that aren't working and who need the help. So I'm just trying to picture it together in the best case scenario. So that's kind of why I understand the logic behind scenario 3, but I want to try and do the best I can to hit the target as best I can. And if my finance officer is comfortable with it, then I'm still comfortable with option 4. Thank you.
Councillor Rintoul.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A question to staff, if I may, with respect to timeline. So if council were to establish a preference this evening, is there an opportunity still for the town to perhaps seek some input on that position from the community and still make your obligations in terms of processing the changes to the budget ultimately?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, if Council made a draft decision tonight subject to further public input, we could advertise ahead of the next meeting to indicate what the decision was, and if anyone would like to provide input to Council on the 27th of April, then they certainly could do so, and then Council could amend your decision at that time.
Thank you, Mr. Hsick, and to the mayor and to my council colleagues. That may well be something that affords us a little more time to hear back from other levels of government as well, if that may provide us with an opportunity to visit those incentives or changes that could come forward also. I'm still happy with the 4th scenario, because it provides, as Councillor Garnett pointed out, some comfort to the CFO that it's obtainable and offers the greatest incentive or the amount of help, I should say, to our local business community. So I'll leave it if there's any other further comments, but I would also be prepared to move that motion at this time.
Okay, I have 2 comments. One is with regards to public input. So we're in this unique situation where the public, the agenda with all of the information before us this evening was made available last Thursday. But unlike the regular budget process that we went through earlier this year that took place over a number of weeks, the public had the opportunity to review or listen to Mr. Hsick's presentations, listen to Council's discussion, and then provide input, and we did have some. In this case, I think while I would be in favor of us making a recommendation this evening, but I would add to the recommendation that we actually post notice over the next 2 weeks, at least once in the Peninsula News Review and on our website and through social media, inviting public input on not only the option that we perhaps recommend this evening, but on any questions or other considerations that they have. And so it wouldn't be a final decision this evening. It would be subject to further public input, as Mr. Hsick indicated, could come forward at our April 27th council meeting 2 weeks from today. With regards to the option, I've shifted my view a little. While I was in favor, given that the CFO supported it, of option 4, a 10% reduction for commercial business, I wanted to take note again of Councillor Wainwright's comment with regards to potential stimulus that the town might want to consider future going down the road, which would have an expenditure or a cost attached to it. And of course, typically, I don't think communities look to their local government for stimulus packages. We're certainly aware of federal and provincial infrastructure and other stimulus packages. There are other economic organizations, Western Economic Diversification, and so on and so forth. But, and while it may be limited, the options we have available to us, I think the uniqueness of the circumstances we're in and the significant and enormous challenges that our business community is facing, that it's incumbent on our council as we move into recovery in the covering months to actually consider possible stimulus measures in our budget that would have expenditures attached to it. And while reducing it from 10 to 5% would reduce the amount that we're giving back in taxes and save us some money towards that, we still have the option of our borrowing authority or loans to look at stimulus as well. So I'm not looking for a discussion on potential stimulus. I think we need to enter into those discussions as we move through our recovery phases. But that's influencing my decision to support a 5% reduction this evening. Councillor Wainwright.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I appreciate my colleagues raising the idea of getting some public input on this, and I very much support doing that. One thing I mentioned to my colleagues who are in the room, I've had an email from somebody who's watching the live stream, and they can't hear anybody who's not in the council chamber. So they're only hearing half of the debate that's going on tonight. And I think that makes it even more important to give the public an opportunity to weigh in, because they probably didn't hear Mr. Hissick, because he's not in the chamber tonight either.
He is.
I am.
Excellent. Okay, so they probably did. I gather you're just sharing the screen through Zoom.
Right.
At any rate, I would support us putting option 3 and option 4 out for public input. I'm not opposed to council identifying a preferred option, but it seems that there's probably a consensus from the discussion that those are the only two options that we'd like to see on the table. At any rate, that's enough for me for now.
Thank you, Councillor.
Yeah, if I may, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, initially, I'm certainly more comfortable with option 4 in that we're talking about going out for a period of some consultation. If I may, a question through to staff before I move a motion then to Mr. Hissick. I know it wasn't the intent to narrow this to 2 as more likely one sort of option to go out for feedback on. But does that still make you comfortable with the timelines you've got if we were looking at option 3 and 4 and going out for public input?
Well, it would be a little more complicated to try and explain that in a small ad, but we could possibly direct people to our website for more information. Just to provide context, the difference to the average commercial property between options 3 and 4 would be about $350.
Thank you, Mr. Hissick. I'd like to move the following motion that council intends to amend the 2020 to 2024 financial plan to reflect either option 3 or 4 presented, with the offsetting funds to come from accumulated surplus following a period of notice to allow for public input.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. The motion carries. Thank you. So we will proceed with a notice to the public of those options. The information will be available on the website and as best we can provide in the newspaper as well. And that will come back before us at the next council meeting on Monday, April 27th. I'd now like to turn to item 13B1, which is options for a delayed tax due date. We have a staff report from Mr. Hissick, and I'd ask Mr. Hissick to introduce this item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is phase 2 of our relief that we're able to provide to the community. And in light of the current and ongoing COVID-19 pandemic and the financial impacts on our community, staff were asked to provide options for delaying the town's normal property tax due date of July 2nd. So in terms of background, the town, like most municipalities in BC, typically follows the standard provincial legislation, which calls for a July 2nd due date each year. The one deviation that the town has allowed in the past is, whereas the standard legislation is to apply a 10% penalty on July 3rd, we have split that into two parts. So we apply only a 5% penalty on July 3rd and a further 5% in September. And while we don't like to talk about penalties, it's important to note that the purpose of a penalty is to provide a strong encouragement for property owners to pay on time. And that's vitally important as taxes make up the majority of municipal funding each year, and the operating year is half over before that revenue is collected. Furthermore, as has been noted earlier tonight, we collect a significant amount of taxes for other jurisdictions, such as the province for school taxes, the regional district, and others. If municipalities were forced to make these remittances to other governments in the absence of having collected taxes, it would have a significant financial impact on our cash flow and our operations as a whole. So the community charter does provide municipalities with an option to adapt a different tax due date, and we can do that by adopting a bylaw under Section 235 of the charter, which is called the Alternative Municipal Tax Collection Scheme. And if we're able to delay the due date, it would allow more time for the financial situation to stabilize somewhat and allow people to recover a little bit from the effects of the pandemic. So staff are recommending that unless the province comes out with a province-wide mandate by the 17th of April, which is this Friday, the town pursue its own tax due date as a relaxation program. So what's proposed in the report, I would like to change that somewhat. I've given it a little more thought since the report went in, and what I had proposed was a tax due date of September 1st, and I'd like to modify that to September 15th, and I'll explain why in a moment. So if we move the tax due date to September 15th and apply a 5% penalty for any unpaid taxes after that date, and then 3 more months later, on December 15th, would go the remaining 5% to make up the required 10%, I believe that would provide some measure of relief. And while not perfect, I think this is probably the best we can do as a way of balancing our needs to operate as well as pay the other tax jurisdictions with providing some measure of relief to the public. The reason I'm proposing the 15th of September instead of the 1st, upon further reflection, is to allow, assuming that we get back to some semblance of normal in the summer, it would be nice to give people a chance to fully enjoy their summer and not have to worry about the tax due date until summer is over, the kids are back in school, we've had the Labor Day long weekend, and then we can deal with the tax due date. So I think this measure of September 15th and December 15th is probably the best we can do in terms of taking care of both our financial needs as well as the communities. So what the impact of this 2.5-month delay would be on our cash flows is that we'll be burning through more of our surplus and reserves just to survive up until that point. And that will impact us in terms of lost investment revenues, perhaps paying more for temporary financing measure interest, and so on. So we will require temporary financing to undertake this measure, and that's covered under a separate report, which is to come next. And finally, I want to point out that even though we're recommending a delay in the tax due date, we'll be asking and encouraging taxpayers who have the means to pay early to do so, on the premise that they'll be improving the financial situation of the town, and that'll result in lower tax impacts over the longer term for themselves and others. And that's the same approach we're taking with our utility bills. Getting the bills out there with a long due date, but encouraging everyone who can pay to do so. With that said, if there are any questions of council, I'd be pleased to address them.
Does council have any questions for Mr. Hisik? Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, over the summer months when you talked about using the surplus and reserves, what's the monthly amount that it costs to run the town? So, $1 million, $2 million, just wondering.
It very much depends on what we have going on in terms of projects, and it's quite cyclical. It's hard to come up with a monthly average that'll make sense in every month of the year.
Okay, thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. Are there any other questions? I just want to add some comment to this. The idea of tax deferral has been in the public's mind, certainly in commercial business mind. I've had a number of businesses contact me directly. I've been in touch with the 2 business associations that have the majority of our local business as members, and this is a very significant is of significant importance to the business community to have a tax deferral. I think for now obvious reasons, due to the closures and loss of income. And going back a number of weeks now, the provincial government, to their credit, through the Minister of Municipal Affairs, Minister Selina Robinson, she has hosted weekly conference calls with the mayors throughout the province and the regional chairs, and CAOs now sit in on those meetings as well. And she provides through our, and we do it on a regional basis, so we do it on the Vancouver Island regional basis, the mayors in the area. And we're given a few minutes to state our question, or ask our questions, state our views, make comments, and solicit a response. And I have to say that mayors throughout the province have been seeking the provincial government to move forward on tax deferral, a consistent tax deferral policy throughout the province. We know a number of businesses do business across municipal jurisdictions, and while we have the tax, while local governments, each local government has the authority to adjust its tax bylaws, as Mr. Hisik has described, it would seem to be more consistent if a provincial approach was taken. As of the conference call last Thursday afternoon with Minister Robinson, we were informed that it is still under consideration and may come forward in the next week or so. However, I believe our council and town are being prudent with what Mr. Hisik has brought forward, because if the province does not go forward with this, we would have to play catch up in terms of having this in place for this tax year. So as Mr. Hisik stated in his report, in his verbal report, that if we do not hear from the province by April 17th, this Friday, and we do have another conference call with the minister this Thursday, that we would proceed with what, subject to council resolution, with what Mr. Hisik is proposing. However, that we could still see the province move forward on this. Councillor Gunnett.
No, just going to move the recommendation if that's okay. I'll move that staff be directed to bring forward an alternative municipal tax collection scheme bylaw featuring a property tax due date of September 15th and a second penalty date of December 15th.
Second.
Okay, just a question through to staff. So to bring forward, the date for that, Mr. Hissick, you would anticipate would be?
The 27th of April.
April 27th, thank you. Any further discussion from council? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hissick. And I'll now turn to was item 5A2, but is now item 13B2, which is the revenue anticipation bylaw. Mr. Hissick, if you could introduce briefly, please.
Briefly? Okay.
Well, please, at your as you wish.
I'll do my best.
At ease.
So the revenue anticipation bylaw is a bylaw that assists the town with cash flow needs in anticipation of a delay in the collection of property taxes. The community charter provides municipalities with the ability to borrow funds on a temporary basis to tide them over for the first half of the year until they collect property taxes. Many, if not most, local governments still employ this annual tool in their regular course of business or as an insurance policy. The town used to do this annually up until 2006, and then we felt it was no longer required, but this circumstance is forcing it upon us as an insurance policy to ensure our cash flows remain adequate up until our September 15th property tax due date. So, in order to allow us to operate until those taxes are collected, having this revenue anticipation bylaw is an insurance policy that allow us to take out only what we need. So the bylaw is written to allow for a maximum of some large amount that we'd never go to, which essentially is 75% of last year's collections. We don't anticipate on actually drawing any of these funds until July or August based on our current cash flow projections. But it's good to know that if we do need it because of the delay in our due dates, that it'll be there for us. So we'd be taking small chunks of revenue as required in order to meet our obligations. And the most pressing of those would be as it currently stands, it would be the regional district requisitions, which are due on August 1st. So we're looking at about $5 million rolling out the door at that date prior to our own tax collections. So that's when we might need a little bit of interim borrowing support. So as I mentioned earlier, and there's a bit of overlap here with the three reports, there's no doubt that there will be some financial impacts of interest foregone on our investments, as well as interest paid on potential temporary borrowing, and those will impact our operations for 2020. And staff will report to council periodically on quantified estimates of these impacts on at least a quarterly basis, so probably at the 6 and the 9 month marks at least. All I've got.
Thanks, Mr. Hissick. I'll turn to questions. Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Hissick. You mentioned the interest rate for the Municipal Finance Authority at 1.445%, but there's no mention of what our financial institution might charge us if we had to go for the line of credit. Do you offhand know what that would be?
It's going to be a little bit higher. I don't have that exact number. We're really hoping that the MFA will be able to do this.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Rintoul.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a comment, if I may, in that I concur with my colleagues from earlier discussion. That eventually we need to start looking at the expense side of the budget. Council's made it clear to the community that we want to look to address the budget and the revenue that we collect from residents and from businesses. That's a priority for us. But addressing those expenses, I concur with my colleagues, will need to be addressed as well. I think this is just a good piece of housekeeping, is the way I see it, to position ourselves to ensure that we're not, finding the town in a default scenario. And so I'm certainly supportive of the bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you. And just, Councillor O'Keefe, please go ahead.
Thank you. So I, understand that the reason why we have to do this. The only concern I have is that I want to make sure that we do a review of our financial plan. I would think, I don't know if it's reasonable to do that in September. But I guess what I'm concerned about is I do think we need to look at not just capital projects, but basic operational expenses, like I said before, whether it means that service levels are adjusted. What I worry about is that if we have this big pot of money here to go and use for whatever expenses staff deem necessary, then I just feel like council loses some amount of oversight there. And so, yes, we need to pay our obligations to those other authorities, but I'd like for us to review the financial plan to make sure that we are happy with what is considered, about what we're going to continue to pay for with that additional funds. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor. And just to put another, to present it another way, we mentioned earlier this evening that the total municipal taxes being collected from residents and businesses this year is anticipated to be about $12.3 million. And normally the due date would be July 2nd for that. We're bringing forward, because we see the importance of it for both residents and businesses, to have a tax deferral to September. We're proposing September 15th. Well, depending on how many residents and how many businesses defer their taxes to that date, we won't be collecting $12.3 million. We don't know, quite frankly, what to forecast in terms of how much we would have by July 2nd. But we are already using reserves for cash flow from January 1st to June 30th. And so we anticipate that, those taxes collected on January the 2nd. So this borrowing anticipation bylaw does provide us the funding for making up any cash flow a gap due to a delay in collection of taxes. But as Mr. Hisik indicated in one of his earlier reports, if we do pass a revision to the tax due date of September 15th, we'll still be encouraging residents and businesses who can to pay their taxes as soon as they can, as early as July 2nd, because it will make a difference for the cash flow of the town, and it will make a difference on how much we have to borrow at some interest to replace that cash flow. So thanks again to Mr. Hisik for his report.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, I'll move first reading.
Second.
We have first and second reading. All those in favor? Motion carries. Sorry, first reading, second reading.
I'll move second reading.
Second.
All those in favor? None opposed. Motion carries. Third reading.
I'll move third reading.
Second.
Any discussion? It's where we have discussion.
Yeah.
Oh, do you have?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Councillor Garnett. Sorry.
It's not so much a question or anything else. I just want to take the time to thank Mr. Hisik for his efforts with everything going on and all the extra duties he's had to take on to be able to present us with all this information, which has been very helpful in our decision making. Your efforts have not been overlooked, so thank you very much.
Councillor Rintoul.
I'll move adoption. Oh, sorry, we're still on third.
We just have to third reading. I'll call the question. All in favor? None opposed. Motion carries.
I'll move adoption.
Second.
All those in favor? None opposed, and that motion carries. Thank you. I would just like to make a comment. During my mayor's remarks this evening, I touched on recovery, just commenting on what Mr. Humble had presented in some detail during his EOC update in terms of turning our mind to an advanced recovery plan, and that we do have a framework, a very detailed framework to work from in terms of advancing that plan And a very important component of that plan is business recovery. But while I spoke to towns, during my earlier mayor's remarks, I spoke to town services recovery in terms of general operations and capital projects. While I spoke to the community in terms of community facilities and events, of course, a huge part of our community is the local businesses and businesses operating and as employers and providing the goods and services they do to our public. So council has been active, and tonight I think is important in terms of the steps we're moving forward with. In terms of reducing the tax increase, looking to reduce the tax increase from 1.79% to 0%. In terms of reducing the tax impact to commercial businesses. In terms of the tax deferrals, and in terms of the advocating that I've been doing and other mayors have been doing in the province for rent relief. And so that's another component that we haven't spoken to this evening, but rent is a significant expense for local business, for businesses everywhere, and mayors have been advocating to both the provincial and federal government for either level of government to bring in rent relief. Rents, as is the Residential Landlord-Tenant Act, is a provincial matter, and so the federal government doesn't have that jurisdiction. And similarly with the commercial landlord-tenant relationship. However, as organizations such as the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, which represents tens of thousands of independent business across the country, has been advocating that we do need action at a federal level on this very important topic. So I do want business owners in our community and in the region to know that that is important and it is before us, and we are again hoping to hear from either the provincial and/or federal government on various rent relief measures. Now moving on in our agenda, I would like to turn to item 13C, which is the liquor license application for the Cut Cartel at 2425 Bevan Avenue. We had a presentation from the proponent earlier, and we have a staff report and recommendation before us.
I'll move the recommendation that owners and tenants in occupation of property within 100 meters, 328 feet of 2425 Bevan Avenue be notified of liquor license application number LA 000002 to allow the serving of alcohol during the hours of barbering services, and that any written correspondence received be forwarded to council for their consideration, and that a public notice be advertised in 2 consecutive issues of the Peninsula News Review, the last publication to appear not less than 3 days and not more than 10 days before the date council is to consider the application.
Second.
A discussion, Councillor Rintoul.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am at this point simply inclined to hear public feedback on this matter, and hence moving the recommendation as opposed to the alternative recommendation. Thank you.
Councillor Garnett.
Yeah, I concur with Councillor Rintoul. I think it's important to get the neighbors' perspective and those in our community as well that don't live in that area for something like this. The question I asked of the applicant earlier was just about the live music, because that is for me I think is something that we can make comments on towards the LCRB, and it's live music is a whole other different kettle of fish than just having like a stereo playing. It's generally quite a bit louder. So that would be something that I'm really going to hear from the neighborhood, because as she commented, they haven't had that yet. So that I wait to hear what they have to say about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm supportive of seeing this move forward. I think this is a good example of a business that is trying to evolve by bringing a different sort of experience. You know, we hear a lot about businesses that are struggling, especially in our downtown core, and the need to come up with different sorts of ways of operating, offering experiences to their customers. So I think it's good to support this, at least to see what the neighborhood thinks. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I guess a question through the staff is, thank you for the detailed report. In one part of the report, it refers to an RCMP referral response. And so this was referred for comment from to our local RCMP detachment. And they raised the issue of possible noise concerns for residents. And of course, we'll hear back from the local residents on their concerns. But in the report, both in that section and in other sections under discussion in the 4 key areas, it talks about items such as adding stipulations regarding live music, dates, times, noise control, amplified music, requirements to soundproof the business, discussion over occupant load, hours of operations. Is that something, after we hear the public input, that staff would bring forward comment or recommendations on those particular aspects rather than council, going through each one of those?
It really does depend on what specific aspect we're talking about. Some are within municipal jurisdictions, some are within provincial jurisdictions. So the question of hours of the business, for example, if council were uncomfortable with the 8 o'clock time frame, for example, and wanted to limit that a little more, council can make a recommendation to the LCRB regarding that. But it's only a recommendation. Unlike with cannabis, municipalities do not have a veto over liquor licenses. We can recommend to the LCRB certain things, but ultimately it's them who make the decision to issue the license. Excuse me, and also them who put the conditions on the license itself. If we're talking about external amplified music and the details of that. Really, it's a zoning bylaw issue. We have some specific conditions for the pub use in the downtown that don't allow external outside amplified music, for example. So I think those details are in the report. And if certain comments come back from the public that have a bearing on, say, any of those municipal conditions or the provincial regulations, we can provide that context and maybe make a recommendation based on that public feedback. Okay, if that answers your question.
That's helpful, but I guess, again, given that a council is looking to move forward to gather a public input, consider that and then make comment to the LCRB through its resolution. The council could be making comment on those particular aspects, and the LCRB, if it's not within municipal zoning or what have you, would consider those elements.
Absolutely. There'll be another full staff report coming back with all the feedback from the public, from the notification and the newspaper advertisements, as well as further discussion on the municipal bylaw, as well as provincial recommendation to the provincial LCRB in the context of those comments. So, for example, the hours of operation, for example, there'll be additional detail coming in terms of what that recommendation to the LCRB can look like.
Okay, no, that's helpful. I think, with that staff report and the final council resolution, I think it's important that the public sees what council is recommending, whether it be occupant load or hours of operation, or if we believe soundproofing is required, or prohibiting live music or outdoor music, and all of those factors. So thank you.
The recommendation from council to the LCRB is very detailed. We have to provide some very specific and prescribed criteria within that recommendation.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Any other comments or questions from council? Seeing none, we do have the motion on the floor. I'll call the question. All in favor? None opposed. That motion carries unanimous. Thank you. We'll then move to item 13D, which is a request for temporary business signage during construction. We have a report from staff dated April the 8th.
I'll move the recommendation that council direct staff to respond to the business owner of Dig This regarding options for applying for a development variance permit to allow business signage on a different business premises.
Second.
Discussion, Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. The only issue that I had with this is that one of the options involved a sandwich board sign, which would presumably be on the sidewalk. And what I've learned in working with the access awareness folks is that sandwich boards are a real problem for people who are in wheelchairs or even walkers or scooters. And so I guess I would be, more inclined to remove that particular option off the table if staff were to provide options to the business owner, whether that's possible.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor O'Keefe, or Councillor Rintoul?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I recognize the observation that Councillor Keith's provided. I feel this is addressed within the staff report with the reference, as long as it is leaned up flat against the building, not set in a typical A formation, referring to providing room to approach the building face. So I'm happy with the staff recommendation.
Other discussion from council members? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? None opposed. The motion carries. Thank you. I'll now move to item 13E, which is a tree removal application at 2081 Weiler Avenue. We have a report from staff and a recommendation.
I will move the recommendation that the request to remove a Douglas fir tree from the front lawn of 2081 Weiler Avenue be denied, and 2, that the request to remove a spruce tree from the municipal boulevard fronting 2081 Weiler Avenue be denied.
Second.
Any discussion? Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. I think there's no option or no information given as to why the spruce tree should be removed, so I'm happy to see that go. Also, the Douglas fir tree, I might have been inclined to provide permission to take that down. It seems that there's some amount of damage to the footings, but not significant enough to warrant the removal of the tree. So what I would say to the petitioners, I noticed in the information provided that they actually didn't excavate or dig down to see whether there had been any damage to the footings to their house. If they provided information like that showed that there was damage, then I might be more inclined to agree to the tree being removed. But as it is, I support denying both requests at this time.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? We have one opposed. Motion carries. Councillor O'Keefe was opposed.
Just clarification.
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor O'Keefe.
Yeah, no, I was not opposed to the motion.
Okay, there must have been a delay in our audio and video, so when I called the question, I asked for those in favor of the motion to deny the application. You didn't raise your hand at that time, and then I did ask for opposed, and that's when I saw your hand. So did you wish to change your vote, Councillor?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, I was voting in favor of the motion.
Okay, so that would be a change in your vote, so that would be a unanimous vote denying the application. Thank you. I'll now move to item 13F, which is referral from the CRD with regards to the CRD Regional Growth Strategy Amendment Bylaw number 4328.
I'll move the recommendation that council accept the proposed regional growth strategy amending bylaw number 4328 and direct staff to respond to the CRD board with council's decision.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? None opposed. Motion carries. Thank you. I'll now move to item 13G, which is a grant application for the Community Emergency Preparedness Fund for our EOC and training stream, and we have a report and recommendation.
I'll move the recommendation that council support a Town of Sydney grant application in the amount of $20,700 to the Community Emergency Preparedness Fund, EOC and training stream.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Call the question. All those in favor? None opposed. Motion carries. Thank you. And we'll move to item 13H, which is MFA financing of new engineering equipment.
I'll move the recommendation that council approve financing the recently purchased Trimble S6 total station survey equipment through the MFA's equipment financing program for a total of $43,437.15 over a 5-year term.
Second.
Discussion? Call a question. All those in favor? None opposed. Motion carries. Thank you. We'll now turn to item 14, and we've raised item 1610 from correspondence from information. The letter from C. McClure regarding backyard chickens. We've raised that and ask a councillor to speak to the correspondence. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The reason I wanted to bring this up again, I know we had discussion about it last May, and at that time, there seemed to be interest in council, pretty well all council members, to consider that this might be a good idea to look into at some point. But at the time, the issue was staff. There wasn't staff time. They had other priorities, and that's understandable. One of the things that we had talked about as the possible option to move this forward was to include this somewhere in the OCP consultations. And so whether it, in the discussions about what our residents want to see in their neighborhoods and that sort of thing. So I guess my question to staff would be, as we're planning our OCP consultations and our plan, is this something that we could fit in somewhere?
Through the mayor to Councillor O'Keefe. I think it is possible that it could come up during the OCP review process, but I think it's more likely that it would come up in a general way. I think one of the things that is a sort of best practice for an OCP review, which is really sort of a general look at a town's land use policies, is to avoid sort of lightning rod or hot button issues. And, previously when this came up in 2013, it became one of those sort of lightning rod issues where I think people have very strong feelings on either side. And issues like that in the context of an OCP review can really sort of tend to derail maybe more important conversations and broader conversations about land use in the community. So I think it may come up in a context of, broader food security discussions. Sydney is a very urban dense community, but we have a lot of agricultural land surrounding us. So a bigger question is, does Sydney want to be a partner and more reliant on North Saanich and Central Saanich and their agricultural land, for example, or do we really want to focus on bringing some of that agriculture into the community? So it's that kind of broader question that I think would probably come up during the OCP review, more of the food security, big picture type of question, and less sort of a, yes or no on urban chickens type of question to the public. Certainly people could suggest in the context of those discussions, we'd like to see urban chickens. We think it would be a good idea. What would come out of that if there was a really strong feeling in the community is, probably a general policy indicating that this is something that the town should investigate in more detail. That would then lead to some staff work and some public outreach, a staff report, some community consultation to look at, is this something specifically that the town would like to pursue, and should council consider a bylaw change in that regard? So the OCP review would be more of the broader question, and council would still need to consider it specifically beyond the OCP being adopted. as a specific yes or no, do we need to change the bylaw question?
Councillor O'Keefe, a follow-up?
Yes, so thank you for that. So I guess I'm wondering how to counsel that, because I've been contacted by one of the petitioners, and then we saw just recently a letter from another individual who was putting another petition together. So there seems like there's significant interest. I mean, the last petition we had, I think there was close to 200 people on it, so it does seem like there's significant interest in our community. And so if these people come to OCP meetings and they talk about they want to have chickens in the community, so then what's the next step? So if we want to move forward with that, would that come to council then, as you say that during the OCP review, this is what you heard from people, and then what would be the next steps after that?
Yeah, through the mayor to Councillor O'Keefe again. So if there was enough sort of support in the community that it was included as part of an OCP policy, for example, say a specific policy that said something like investigate the possibility of urban chickens in Sydney on appropriate land uses or something like that. The next step would be either staff would fit that into a work plan and bring forward a staff report and a proposal for probably some community engagement to really delve into the specifics of where might this happen, what kind of land uses should it happen on, how much community support is there. Put that further information into another staff report, go back to council again with some specific direction, possibly a draft bylaw. Alternatively, council at any time could direct staff to do that work before or after the bylaw. So it's really a matter of whether or not that general policy is in the future OCP or not. At some point, either council needs to make a decision on moving that project forward, or staff could alternately, if there is time, bring that forward as a work plan item.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Duncan.
Thanks. I had also wanted to raise this one, but I'm really on the fence about it. I know the staff's time won't have improved since last time we reviewed this. It's only have gotten worse. And I mean, I've been to a number of food security meetings with the Climate Caucus. I've listened in on a few with CR Fair. And CR Fair has briefing notes where they've been sharing the results of their meetings and every week. So crfair.ca, anyone can go there and read their briefing notes and see what the actual farmer situation in food security is. So the question, if we were going to move this forward, because now conditions have changed, which is I think what these petitioners are trying to bring it back, arguing that it has, you would have to actually have this affect enough people in our town who would now be able to have chickens, that it would impact food security more than our access to everyone in North Saanich who currently can. And a lot of people in North Saanich have now got new chickens. And so which means that next year there's going to be a lot of people giving away chickens because they've only got them for the first time. And one of the things that staff had brought up last time was, well, actually I think in the original report in 2013 was that when it became very trendy, a lot of people bought chickens, and then it stopped being trendy because chickens are actually hard to take care of, and they gave them away, and they were flooding the animal rescue societies with them. I'm worried that if we try to move something forward with, pandemic panic chickens, that the same thing is going to happen the next year. That a lot of people who bought chickens because they were suddenly worried they weren't going to be able to buy eggs are going to next year realize that trying to set up chickens on their own was at least as expensive as if they continued buying eggs from their neighbors. and harder. So I'm on the fence. On the other hand, as many people have raised, that's going to be a problem in any of the other jurisdictions who already have chickens. So I feel like if we're going to start trying to broach topics regarding food security and what we're actually going to devote staff time to, because they said, you know, we'd have to look at a dozen of bylaws to look at, you know, buildings and outdoor areas and looking at how big yards are, that we actually had ourselves look at a food policy council. I think that would be our first step, is actually getting the food processors, food growers, restaurants, people with a stake in food security in the town to start getting together and looking at what our actual weaknesses are, and then moving forward with something from there.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. Did you wish to continue?
Yeah, I'm just kind of hesitating because I realize I'm leaving that with like I've talked about a food policy council, but I'm thinking I'm not going to make a motion at this time. I'm just going to bring that up, the idea of a food policy council, because I know the EOC is working on a recovery strategy, and put that out there for the public, because I know in a lot of jurisdictions where food policy councils been formed, that actually the impetus came from people in the public. So if we do have enough people who are concerned about it, and any of them can hear me on this video, hopefully they will start contacting maybe council about interest in that. And otherwise, the EOC might have that on their radar when they start looking at recovery planning.
Thanks, Councillor Duncan. And just to add, Mr. Humble did, when he did speak to the various components of an advanced recovery plan through the EOC, did talk about future resilience and sustainability in our community, which would include food security. And so there might be an opportunity to consider this among a range of options. But I just wanted to speak to the fact that today Council received via email from a resident in Sydney an online petition at change.org with regards to chickens in Sydney, backyard chickens in Sydney, and to note to the public that we do have within our council procedure procedures for delegations and petitions, and that if a petition is to come forward to council properly, it needs to have the body of the petition. It needs to have the people who have the people's names, addresses, and signatures, and it needs to be presented via hard copy, not via a link to an online petition if we are to consider such a petition in the future. This particular petition, taking a quick view of it today, appears to have people who have signed on from other parts of the country, other parts of the world, and just doesn't fit the typical procedure bylaws that municipalities have for receiving petitions. So I just wanted to acknowledge that we did receive that today. However, that form will not be received formally to council. So I would, if there's no further discussion, I would look for a motion to receive this correspondence.
So moved.
Second.
Further discussion, seeing none, calling the question, all in favor? None opposed, motion carries. Thank you. We have no new business. We do have the remaining items under correspondence for information.
Move it straight.
Second.
All those in favor? None opposed, motion carries. Thank you. And we have no notices of motion. We do have a motion to go in camera.
I'll move that it's in the opinion of council that the public interest requires that persons other than members of the council and officers be excluded from the meeting to consider confidential matters respecting personnel issues pursuant to section 90.1C of the community charter, and that the council continue the meeting in closed session.
Second.
All in favor? Opposed, motion carries. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, members of the public who joined us by webcast this evening.